The coffee shop was tucked into a quiet side street in Chicago's Lincoln Park, so still I could hear the slow, rhythmic creak of the old ceiling fan overhead. Ethan sat across from me, his navy Tom Ford suit tailored perfectly to his tall frame, screaming success and sophistication, a sophistication that, to me, now felt alien and calculated. He kept glancing at his watch, his fingers drumming a restless beat on the water-stained wooden table. I knew he was in a hurry, not to get back to the office to close a multi-million-dollar deal, as he used to lie, but to get to the hospital with Chloe. His personal assistant, Chloe, was pregnant with the son he'd always craved. Ethan slid the signed divorce papers across the table toward me, along with a glossy black credit card. "I've already signed," he said, his voice even but cold. "Just sign your part. I'll let you have the old condo out in the suburbs. Consider it a token for our years together. I'm keeping Leo. The standard of living at my house is better. You'd only make him miserable, dragging him along with you." I picked up the papers, my eyes scanning the dry, legalistic text. 5 years of my youth, 5 years of sacrifice and building a home, now valued at a rundown condo and the forfeiture of my motherhood. I didn't feel the sharp pain I'd expected. Perhaps the disappointment had worn the nerve down to a numb callus. I set the papers down and gently pushed the credit card back toward him. I looked directly into his eyes, my gaze so calm it made him flinch. "I'll sign," I said. "But I have one condition. I don't want the condo, I don't want any alimony, and I won't fight you for custody of Leo. I want to take your mother, Diane, with me. I'll take care of her." Ethan froze, his eyes widening in disbelief, as if I'd just told the world's most ridiculous joke. He stared at me, searching for any sign of insanity, but all he found was unwavering resolve. Diane, his mother, the woman from a small town who had worked her fingers to the bone for him, had in the last 2 years become forgetful and confused. Sometimes she couldn't even control her own hygiene. To Ethan and his trendy young mistress, she was nothing more than an anchor, holding them back from the glamorous life they envisioned. Chloe had already made several not-so-subtle hints about putting Diane in a cheap state-run nursing home to get her out of the way, but Ethan hesitated, fearing the judgment of his extended family. Ethan's face relaxed, the astonishment melting away into unadulterated joy, as if a 1,000-pound weight had just been lifted from his shoulders. He tried to suppress a triumphant smirk, but the glint in his eyes gave him away. He quickly pulled out his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. A moment later, my phone pinged with the sterile sound of a bank notification. Ethan's lips curled into a sneer, his voice dripping with condescension. "I just transferred you $5,000. Consider it back pay for taking care of her, plus her first month of expenses. You're a real fool, you know that? Taking on a burden when you could have walked away with a clean break." I glanced at the transfer notification, a nameless bitterness rising in my throat. $5,000. That was the price this successful son had put on the mother who had given him life, who had sold everything she had to put him through college and business school. In his eyes, his mother was now a used-up commodity to be liquidated as quickly as possible. I put my phone away, picked up the pen, and signed the divorce papers with a firm, steady hand. My signature wasn't shaky, it was as sharp as my decision to sever this toxic bond. Ethan picked up the document, blowing gently on the ink. His face was beaming, as if he'd just closed the deal of a lifetime. He stood up, adjusting his tie, and spoke to me with the patronizing tone of a superior. "That $5,000 buys me a clear conscience. You keep your word. If she gets sick or passes away, don't you dare bring her back to my house. From now on, she's your mother. She has nothing to do with me." I sat in silence, watching his back disappear through the glass door. The late afternoon sun cast long, fragmented stripes of light across the cafe, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I took a sip of my now cold coffee. The bitter taste coated my tongue before sliding down my throat, as bitter as the human heart. I didn't know what the future held with $5,000 and an ailing mother-in-law, but I knew I had just done the most right thing of my life. I had let go of a worthless husband and held onto a piece of warming humanity for myself. The heavy iron gate of the Winnetka mansion swung open with a screech, like the dying cry of our shattered marriage. I walked into the familiar yard, where every plant and every blade of grass had been tended by my hand, but which now felt chillingly desolate. The air inside the house was suffocating, Chloe's cloying perfume hanging everywhere, overpowering the warm, welcoming scent of cinnamon I used to keep simmering on the stove. Diane was huddled in a corner of the kitchen, holding a cold, congealed microwave dinner. She ate mechanically, her cloudy eyes staring into the distance as she mumbled nonsensical phrases. My heart clenched at the sight. Ethan, with his luxury cars and designer clothes, let his own mother eat leftover scraps in his home. I approached her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Mom, I'm here to take you with me. Are you done eating? I'll clean up." Diane looked up, her vacant gaze meeting mine. For a split second, I saw a flash of sharp, lucid intelligence in her eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same familiar daze. She clung to my arm, her thin, liver-spotted hand trembling like a drowning person grabbing a lifeline. In the living room, our son Leo was sprawled on the imported Italian leather sofa, his eyes glued to his iPad. The jarring sounds of a video game filled the room. At only 5 years old, he already wore thick glasses, his body pudgy from too many fast food meals. I walked over, wanting to hug him one last time before I left. Though I hadn't fought for custody, the maternal bond was undeniable. "Leo," I called softly. "It's Mommy. I'm leaving now, sweetie." He didn't even turn around. He recoiled, scrambled off the couch, and ran to hide behind Ethan. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, a victorious smirk playing on his lips. From behind his father's legs, Leo peeked out at me with the eyes of a stranger, filled with a chilling animosity. His childish voice was clear, but the words were as cruel as a knife. "Daddy says you're lame, Mommy. You should go. I don't want to live with you. I want to live with Daddy and Chloe. Chloe buys me V-Bucks and pizza. You just make me do homework and eat vegetables." I was frozen to the spot. Those innocent words were like a bucket of ice water thrown in my face, shocking me into a painful clarity. All this time, Ethan and Chloe had been poisoning my son's mind, turning him into a selfish, materialistic echo of themselves. I realized I had lost my son long ago, not on paper, but in his heart and mind. Even if I fought, cried, and begged now, I would only be holding on to his body. His soul already belonged to the glittering world of material possessions. Chloe descended the stairs, a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice in her hand. She wore a thin silk maternity dress, her belly showing a slight curve. She glided through the room like she was already its rightful owner. She glanced at me, then at the small suitcase I'd packed by the door, her voice dripping with scorn. "Did you check your things carefully? Make sure you didn't accidentally take anything that belongs to this house. Even the forks and spoons were bought with Ethan's money. Just take yourself and get out." Ethan said nothing, merely stroking his son's hair with a look of pride, tacitly approving of his mistress's insolence. I swallowed my tears, refusing to stoop to her level. I turned and helped Diane to her feet, slinging her worn-out canvas bag over my shoulder. Diane stood, a little unsteady, and looked back at Ethan one last time. It wasn't a look of regret, but a look of finality, heavy with unspoken meaning. Then she turned to me, her hand gripping my arm as if to lend me strength. I led Diane out the door, leaving the magnificent but heartless mansion behind. I didn't look back at Ethan, at Chloe, or at the son I had given birth to. "Goodbye," I said to Ethan, my voice even but firm. "I hope you don't regret this someday." Ethan laughed, a loud, hollow sound that echoed in the quiet space. "Regret? You should worry about yourself. Let's see how long the two of you last on $5,000. The iron gate clanged shut behind us with a dead, final thud. I helped my mother-in-law walk down the hot asphalt driveway, the shadows of two women, one old and one young, stretching long and distorted beside us. Though I only had a small amount of money and an uncertain future ahead, I felt strangely, incredibly light. It was as if I had just stepped out of a prison that had caged my soul for years. I squeezed her hand and whispered, "Let's go, Mom. From now on, it's just you and me." Diane didn't speak, only nodding slightly, but her hand gripped mine tighter than ever before. The taxi pulled away from the curb. I sat in the back, still holding my mother-in-law's frail hand. Diane sat quietly, clutching a faded red plastic tote bag, the only luggage she brought from the home she'd spent a lifetime building. I knew that inside were just a few old house dresses, a bottle of menthol rub, and some dried betel nuts. The sight made my eyes sting, a mix of pity and sorrow catching in my throat. We stopped in front of a modest apartment complex, deep in a small alley on the outskirts of the city. I had secretly rented this place a few days ago, when the premonition of my departure became undeniable. The room was barely 150 square feet, the paint on the walls was yellowed, but it was clean and quiet. I helped Diane inside and sat her down on the simple twin bed. The musty smell of a budget rental filled the air, a world away from the expensive essential oils of the mansion. Strangely, I could breathe easier here. I poured her a glass of warm water and was about to start unpacking when Diane suddenly grabbed my hand. The grip was so strong it startled me. I turned to reassure her, as I always did with the elderly and confused, but the words died on my lips. The woman before me was no longer the frightened, dazed old lady from the past few years. Diane sat up straight, her once cloudy eyes now sharp and bright with an authoritative gleam. She placed the glass on the table, her voice steady and clear, without a hint of confusion or tremor. "Mia, are you done crying? If you are, lock the door and sit down. I have something to show you." I was stunned, frozen in place for a few seconds, unable to believe what I was hearing. Diane sighed and pulled me down to sit beside her. Her hand gently stroked my messy hair, a tender gesture that made my tears well up again. "I'm sorry for deceiving you for the past 2 years, my dear," she said, her voice sad but firm. "If I hadn't pretended to be senile, how would I have ever seen the true, black heart of my own son? How would I have known who truly cared for me?" With that, she pulled the old tote bag closer. She took out the worn clothes on top, then reached deep down to the bottom, where a floral fabric lining had been discreetly sewn in. Using a small pair of scissors, she carefully cut the stitches and pulled out a black, leather-bound notebook with frayed edges and a tiny USB flash drive. I looked at the items, then back at her, my mind reeling with questions. Diane opened the notebook, flipping through pages filled with meticulous handwriting and columns of numbers. She pointed to one page, her voice hardening. "Look here. This is the date and time Ethan withdrew money from the company account to buy that car for Chloe. And this is the high-interest loan he took from those sharks, claiming it was for factory expansion, but he actually poured it all into cryptocurrency on that witch's advice." "My mind might have been gone," she continued, "but my ears weren't deaf, and my eyes weren't blind. Every time they were scheming in his office, they thought I was just some crazy old lady playing with trinkets in the hallway, so they never guarded their words." I held the notebook, the numbers dancing before my eyes, forming a complete picture of Ethan's betrayal and moral decay. The wealth and success he flaunted was just an empty shell, rotten from the inside. "Mom, how did you know all this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Diane looked at me, her eyes glistening. "What good would telling you have done, child? Just make you suffer sooner?" I was prepared to turn a blind eye, hoping he'd get it out of his system and come back to his senses. But the day that Chloe moved in, when you were out, she dared to throw a bowl of hot soup on me, and Ethan, he just stood there and watched his mother get burned without saying a word. That's when I knew. I had lost my son. I was wrong to spoil him, to let him grow into such an ungrateful monster. But I was lucky, because heaven compensated me with a daughter. She pressed the USB drive into my hand, her voice becoming serious. "On here are copies of all the secret transactions and audio recordings I managed to get with your father-in-law's old mini recorder. I don't understand much about technology, but I know this is important. You keep it. This will be our weapon. The $5,000 he gave you today is pocket change, Mia. We are not leaving empty-handed just so they can laugh at us." I threw my arms around her and sobbed, not from sorrow, but from an overwhelming rush of emotion. In that small, damp room, a warm flame of love and trust ignited between two women unrelated by blood. I realized I was not alone in this fight. I had a mother on my side, an old woman with more wisdom and courage than anyone I knew. That night, in a fitful sleep in a new place, I dreamed I was walking down a long road, holding my mother-in-law's hand. At the end of the road was a brilliant light, and behind us, the long shadow of a painful past. The next morning, weak sunlight filtered through the narrow window, waking me from a night of restless dreams. Diane was already awake, sitting at a small plastic table, carefully smoothing out the important documents she had brought with her. Seeing her stooped back, my heart filled with an infinite tenderness. She turned and smiled gently. "You're awake, dear? Go get some breakfast. I bought some bagels from the shop on the corner. That simple gesture felt more comforting than any lavish breakfast I'd ever had to prepare for my demanding in-laws. After our simple meal, Diane solemnly placed a thick file on the table. It contained the legal documents she had guarded like treasure for years. She began to explain the origins of the assets Ethan was managing. It turned out that the current family business, Harrison Packaging Solutions, wasn't built by Ethan, as he so often boasted. It was the lifelong work of my late father-in-law. When he passed away suddenly, Ethan was too young and immature, so Diane, as the legal heir, held 60% of the founding shares and the deeds to all the factory land. Diane took a sip of tea, her voice dropping. Back then, I felt sorry for him. He was just out of college and wanted a title to help him in the business world, so I signed a power of attorney, giving him managerial control. I thought, I'm getting old. This will all belong to him and his children eventually, so what does it matter whose name is on it? But I was wrong. Power and money, in the hands of someone without morals, becomes a double-edged sword. I flipped through the pages. The official seals seemed to confirm the absolute power of the woman sitting before me. According to the documents, Ethan was merely a hired CEO. Diane was the chairwoman of the board with ultimate authority. For years, Ethan had skillfully hidden this truth, making everyone, including me and the company employees, believe he was the sole owner. He used her trust and feigned senility to manipulate the books, slowly siphoning assets into shell companies registered in Chloe's name. Diane pointed to a crucial clause in the power of attorney agreement. Read this part carefully. This agreement has a 5-year term and renews automatically unless a notice of termination is issued by the principal party. And most importantly, if the authorized party commits a serious breach of ethics, causes damage to the assets, or fails to fulfill their duty of care to the principal party, the principal has the right to unilaterally and immediately terminate all authority. I looked up at her, my heart pounding. Ethan had signed his own death warrant when he forced me into a divorce and threw his own mother out. He thought that with $5,000 and a signed document, he was free of his burden. He had no idea that his callous act had just triggered the very clause that would strip him of his power. Diane looked at me, her eyes resolute. Yesterday, he signed a paper relinquishing his legal responsibility to care for me and entrusting me to you. His own lawyer witnessed it because he was afraid I'd come back later and claim a share of his assets. He doesn't know that very paper legally justifies me transferring my full guardianship and asset management authority to you. Mia, from now on, you will be my legal representative. You will take back what belongs to this family. I clutched the file, feeling its weight in my hands. This wasn't just about money, it was about honor and justice. He sold his mother for $5,000, Diane continued, her voice as steely as a general's before battle. What a bargain, right? But he's going to pay for it with his entire career and reputation. I don't care about the money, Mia. I only regret that I failed to raise him to be a good man. This time, I'm going to teach him one final lesson. A lesson about karma. I looked deep into her eyes and saw not blind hatred, but the profound pain of a mother forced to punish her own child to save what little humanity he had left. I grasped her hand and nodded firmly. Don't worry, Mom. I won't let you down. We will take back everything, not out of greed, but because we cannot let evil triumph. The first few days in our small apartment were surprisingly peaceful. There were no more drunken tirades from Ethan, no more condescending glares from his mistress. I started to adapt to my new life, using the meager $5,000 in Diane's old contacts to start a small online business selling organic produce from local farms. Diane, despite her age, was sharp as a tack. She taught me how to source the best products and how to negotiate with wholesalers. My country bumpkin mother-in-law, it turned out, was a living encyclopedia of business and human relations. Our tiny apartment was always filled with the comforting smell of food and the sound of laughter, 1,000 times warmer than that cold mansion. One afternoon, as I was busy packing orders, my phone rang. The name Ethan, which I hadn't gotten around to changing, flashed on the screen, making my heart skip a beat. I hesitated before answering, putting it on speaker for Diane to hear. The other end of the line erupted with shouting, mixed with the sound of things being thrown. What the hell took you so long to answer? Where did you put my navy blue tie? And the files for the bee project? I've torn this whole house apart and I can't find them. Get back here right now and find them for me. Hurry up, I'm late for a meeting." His tone was as arrogant and entitled as ever, as if I were still the live-in maid, not his ex-wife. He was used to me having his meals ready, his clothes ironed, and his documents perfectly organized. Now that I was gone, his perfect kingdom had devolved into chaos. I could picture him, frantic and sweating, rummaging through a mountain of messy clothes, while his precious Chloe was likely getting a manicure or sleeping in, certainly not lifting a finger to help. I replied calmly, my voice ice-cold. "Ethan, I think you've forgotten we're divorced. I am not your assistant anymore. Your ties, your files, find them yourself. Or ask your darling new partner to do it. Don't call and bother me again." There was a stunned silence on the other end. He was probably shocked by my firm tone. Before, a single sigh from him would have sent me into a panic. He roared, You dare talk to me like that? Without me, you're just a useless woman. Get back here, I'll give you $500. Find my stuff and then get out." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. $500? Does he think he can buy my dignity? Diane shook her head in disgust beside me. "Keep your money for therapy, Ethan," I said, my voice final. "Goodbye." I hung up and blocked his number. The endless dial tone on his end must have made him furious enough to smash his expensive phone. I turned to my mother-in-law and saw her staring out the window, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "He had it too easy, Mia," she said softly. "When his father died, we struggled. He knew how to do his own laundry, how to cook for himself. Now, with a little money, he's forgotten how to be a human being." The story of Ethan's call was quickly forgotten amidst the daily grind, but even though I had left, I still had a clear picture of what was happening at the company. Not because I cared, but because Diane still had her loyalists, veteran employees from her husband's time, who were disgusted by Ethan's arrogance. Through their discreet messages, I learned that Chloe was revealing her true colors, sucking the life out of the company like a parasite. With the title of future Mrs. Harrison and a growing baby bump, she had given herself absolute power. Her first act wasn't to learn the business, but to purge anyone who disagreed with her. The head accountant, a man who had been with the company for 15 years, was fired for refusing to approve her extravagant personal shopping sprees, disguised as client entertainment. In his place, Chloe brought in a flock of her unqualified relatives, stuffing them into key positions to make it easier to manipulate funds. The company descended into chaos. Orders were delayed, defective products were returned by angry clients, but no one dared to report it to Ethan, fearing Chloe's wrath. Ethan, meanwhile, was lost in a haze of victory and the fantasy real estate projects Chloe dangled in front of him. He had no idea the company's reserve funds, which he had foolishly entrusted to her, were being drained daily to finance her collection of designer bags, spa treatments, and lavish lifestyle. One afternoon, Maria, the elderly cleaning lady at the company, secretly called Diane. Her voice trembled over the phone. "Mrs. Harrison, you need to tell Mia to do something. The company is going to fall apart. That Chloe woman brought her family here again today, making everyone call her Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Ethan has been locked in his office smoking all day. I heard he's in trouble with some auditors over fake invoices Chloe brought in. All the factory workers are worried. Our paychecks are late again this month." I listened on speakerphone, watching Diane's knuckles turn white as she gripped the edge of the table. The company was her husband's life's work, the livelihood of hundreds of families, and now it was being trampled by a worthless woman. Diane took a deep breath, trying to contain her fury. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. "You see, Mia? The truth always comes out. That woman doesn't love Ethan. She loves his money. She's grabbing everything she can because she knows that baby isn't a permanent meal ticket." I nodded, my mind racing. Ethan had fallen into a trap of his own making. He had abandoned a loyal wife who knew how to save and build for a gold digger who only knew how to spend and destroy. The warm family dinners had been replaced by extravagant, soulless parties. Order had been replaced by chaos and lies. I remembered the long nights I had stayed up with Ethan preparing bids, the times I had skipped lunch to save money for new machinery. The Ethan of the past, though hot-tempered, still had passion. The Ethan of today, according to Maria, was just a weak man, manipulated by greed and hiding from reality. Diane placed a hand on my shoulder, cutting through my thoughts. "It's time, Mia. Get the documents ready. Tomorrow you will go to the bank and the IRS on my behalf. We can't let the company collapse. It's your father-in-law's legacy, not a gold mine for them to plunder. I looked at my mother-in-law and gave a firm nod. According to HR policy, I had to return to the company one last time to finalize my 401k rollover and other paperwork. I dreaded setting foot in that place, so full of mixed memories, but I needed to close this chapter cleanly. I chose a simple pantsuit, applied light makeup to hide my fatigue, and took a deep breath before walking through the familiar glass doors. The atmosphere was even more grim and oppressive than I'd imagined. The vibrant energy that used to fill the space when I was managing things was gone. The reception area was deserted. The potted plants in the corner were wilting from neglect, their yellow leaves scattered on the floor. A few old employees saw me and gave me small, furtive nods, their eyes darting around nervously as if afraid of being seen. I smiled to reassure them and was heading towards the HR office when a sharp, shrill voice cut through the awkward silence. Well, 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 is this a public market now? People can just wander in and out as they please? Chloe emerged from the CEO's office. She was wearing a ridiculously expensive designer maternity dress that clung tightly to her body, emphasizing her still small bump. On her finger sparkled a diamond ring. I recognized instantly the one Ethan had promised to buy me for our 5th wedding anniversary. Chloe tilted her chin up, her eyes full of contempt and victory, looking down at me as if she were a queen and I a lowly servant. I stopped and looked her straight in the eye, my voice level. I'm here to see HR to get my final paperwork, as required by law. I'll be gone as soon as I'm finished. I won't disturb your fresh air. Chloe let out a loud, cackling laugh that was grating to the ears. She walked closer, her heavy perfume assaulting my nose. She theatrically cradled her stomach, speaking loudly enough for the whole office to hear. Oh, please, don't bother with excuses. You probably burned through that $5,000 already and came crawling back to beg Ethan for more. I know your type. You act all tough when you leave, but the second you're hungry, you come back with your tail between your legs. But you're too late, Mia. This company, this house, and Ethan, they all belong to my baby and me now. I clenched the strap of my purse, fighting to control my anger. I knew she was trying to provoke me, to make me lose my cool and get into a screaming match in the middle of the office. I gave her a small, pitying smile. You can have him. I never pick up things I've already thrown in the trash, no matter how much you try to polish them, and you should enjoy it while it lasts. Things you steal are never truly yours. My words hit their mark, her heavily made-up face flushed with rage. She glared at me, about to lunge, but then she saw Ethan's silhouette through the glass wall of the conference room. Chloe's eyes darted around, and then she did something I never saw coming. She deliberately tripped herself on the leg of a chair, collapsing dramatically to the floor. She clutched her stomach and let out a piercing shriek. Ah, my stomach! Ethan, help! She pushed me. Her scream echoed through the office. The conference room door flew open and Ethan burst out, his face a mask of pure panic. He saw Chloe on the floor moaning and crying, and me standing nearby, still processing her bizarre act. Without a single question, without even a glance at the security cameras, he rushed to Chloe's side. Honey, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is the baby okay? He fussed. Chloe sobbed into his chest, her trembling finger pointing at me. I just wanted to say hello, and she called me a homewrecker. Then she pushed me. Ethan, if something happens to our son, I don't want to live. A wave of fury washed over Ethan. He turned to me, his eyes bloodshot and blazing with a hatred I had never seen before, as if I were his mortal enemy, not the woman who had shared his bed for 5 years. He shot up, stormed towards me, and swung his hand. Crack! The slap landed hard on my left cheek, so forceful it sent me stumbling. My head spun, my ear ringing. I could taste the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. The entire office fell silent. The employees who had once respected me, who I had helped, all stared at the floor, not one daring to speak up. The silence was so complete I could hear the shattering of the last remnants of my heart. Slowly, I lifted my head and wiped the trickle of blood from the corner of my lip. My cheek burned, but my heart was frozen solid. I looked at Ethan, not with tears or screams, but with an emptiness that must have been terrifying to behold. That slap hadn't just hurt my body, it had obliterated any lingering affection, any shred of respect, any beautiful memory that was left between us. Ethan stared at his own hand, a flicker of shock in his eyes. Perhaps even he hadn't expected to hit me so hard. But Chloe's pathetic whimpers pulled him back to his cruel reality. He pointed a shaking finger at my face and yelled, "Get out! Get out of here right now! If anything happens to my son, I will make your life a living hell. Don't you ever let me see you again." I looked at the man before me, a complete stranger. Was this the man who had once promised to protect me for the rest of my life? I let out a soft, hollow laugh, full of contempt. "Thank you for the slap, Ethan. It confirms I made the right choice leaving this filthy place. Remember today. Because in the future, even if you kneel and beg, I will never forget this." Then I turned and walked away, my head held high. I returned to the apartment with a red, swollen cheek, the imprint of 5 fingers stark against my skin. Diane was preparing vegetables and dropped the bowl with a clatter when she saw me. She rushed over, her wrinkled hands trembling as she gently touched the angry mark on my face. She didn't have to ask who did it. She knew her son's temper and his mistress's venom all too well. Her eyes turned red, but she didn't cry. Instead, a cold, suppressed rage settled over her features. She led me to the bed and applied a soothing balm to my cheek, her voice low and dangerously calm. "He dared to hit you. He dared to hit you for that witch." "Fine. I was going to give him a little more time to repent, but it seems he has chosen his own destruction." She stood up, walked to an old wooden wardrobe, and retrieved a simple, old-fashioned cell phone she had kept hidden. She dialed a familiar number. It was Mr. Chen, her late husband's trusted lawyer, the only one who held the original will and power of attorney documents. Diane's voice was clipped and decisive. "Mr. Chen, initiate the asset reclamation process. File the injunctions with the court and all relevant agencies this afternoon. No more holding back. I want it done thoroughly." At the same time, I opened my old laptop and plugged in the USB drive from Diane. The data proof of tax evasion, slush funds, and fraudulent contracts Ethan had signed under Chloe's influence loaded onto the screen. I composed an anonymous email, attached all the evidence, and sent it to the whistleblower tip lines for the IRS and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Numbers don't lie, and they would be the harshest verdict for greed and ignorance. 2 days later, on a gloomy morning, as Ethan sat in his office daydreaming about billion-dollar projects, his door burst open. It wasn't an employee, but a team of stern-faced agents from the IRS. They presented a warrant for a surprise audit, citing evidence of serious financial misconduct. I heard later from Maria that Ethan's face went white as a sheet. He stammered, trying to remain calm, and secretly called for the head accountant. But he had forgotten that the old, competent accountant had been fired by Chloe, and her new hires were completely clueless, unable to answer the agent's sharp questions. Chloe, who had been filing her nails nearby, turned pale with fear. Her fake stomach pains from the other day were miraculously gone. She tried to slip out but was stopped by an agent and told to remain for questioning. The entire office was in an uproar. In our small apartment, Diane and I received the news without a flicker of emotion. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. Ethan had sown the wind, and now he would reap the whirlwind. His punishment came not from my personal vendetta, but from his own disregard for the law and basic decency. News that Harrison Packaging was being investigated by the IRS spread like wildfire. Business partners who had once flattered Ethan and slapped his back suddenly turned on him. They called to cancel orders and demand immediate payment of outstanding debts. Afraid the company would go bankrupt, Ethan's phone rang off the hook, not with congratulations, but with threats and harsh demands. Worse were the uninvited guests. The loan sharks Ethan had gotten involved with sent a few heavily tattooed, menacing-looking men to simply sit in the company lobby and in front of his mansion. They didn't shout or break things. They just sat there, smoking and staring, their cold gazes making Ethan and Chloe's blood run cold. The company's bank accounts were frozen for the investigation, cutting off all cash flow. Ethan desperately tried to find money. He checked all his personal savings accounts, only to find they had been systematically drained by Chloe for her shopping sprees and for building a new house for her parents back home. What little was left was a drop in the ocean compared to the mountain of debt that was compounding daily. In a last-ditch effort, Ethan decided to mortgage the factory and the mansion. He found the property deeds and business licenses in his safe and eagerly called a real estate broker, believing he still held all the cards. But when he took the documents to a title company to begin the process, he was hit by a reality far more painful than my slap. The officer pushed the file back across the desk. "I'm sorry, sir," he said coolly. "These assets are currently frozen due to an ownership dispute. The registered owner, a Miss Diane Harrison, has filed an injunction with all relevant authorities to block any sale or transfer of property. You are only the authorized manager, and it appears your power of attorney was officially revoked this morning." Ethan stood frozen, his ears ringing. The file slipped from his grasp, the papers scattering across the floor. He couldn't believe it. His mother? The senile old woman who couldn't even use the bathroom by herself? He remembered the sharp look in her eyes the day she left, my calm smile, and a chill ran down his spine. He had never been the owner. He was just a puppet dancing on a stage his mother had built. And now, the puppeteer had decided to cut the strings. Chloe, standing beside him, heard the news, and her face went ashen. She immediately started screaming at Ethan, calling him useless, a fraud. The two greedy partners began tearing each other apart right there in public, all pretense of love gone. I heard the story from Mr. Chen and could only sigh. When the money runs out, so does the love. Ethan was finally tasting the bitter helplessness that I had endured for so long. Exactly 1 month after our divorce was finalized, I stood before the mirror, adjusting my crisp white blouse and tailored black blazer. The reflection was not of a weary, sleep-deprived housewife, but of a calm and determined woman. Diane sat on a chair behind me, smiling. Her smile gave me all the strength I needed. Today, we were returning to the place we had been cast out from, but in a completely different capacity. At the company headquarters, tension filled the boardroom. According to Maria, Ethan had called an emergency meeting to try and force a quick sale of a production line to pay off the loan sharks. He sat at the head of the table, his face gaunt and unshaven, his bloodshot eyes darting around nervously. Chloe sat beside him, her usual arrogance replaced by anxious fidgeting. The boardroom door swung open. Mr. Chen walked in first, followed by me and Diane. Our entrance caused a stunned uproar. Ethan leaped to his feet, his chair screeching against the floor. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Who let you in here? Security. Get them out of my office." Mr. Chen calmly placed his briefcase on the table and pulled out a document with an official seal. His voice boomed in the silent room. "Mr. Harrison, members of the board, I am here to announce that as of this moment, Mrs. Diane Harrison has officially terminated all managerial authority granted to Mr. Ethan Harrison due to a gross breach of fiduciary duty. Furthermore, Mrs. Harrison has transferred her full proxy, including all voting and operational rights, to Miss Mia. This decision is legally binding and effective immediately." Ethan was speechless, his face drained of all color. He stared at the document as if it were his death sentence. The other board members began whispering, their gazes shifting from Ethan with doubt to open contempt. I stepped forward and placed my hands on the files on the table, looking my ex-husband straight in the eye. "Ethan, I believe you're in my seat." Chloe shrank in her chair. She knew her golden goose had just been cooked. If my arrival had shocked Ethan, Diane's presence delivered the fatal blow. He had always believed his mother was a doddering old woman lost in the past, but the woman standing before him now was a stranger. Diane wore an elegant plum-colored dress, her silver hair styled in a neat bun. Her face, though lined with age, radiated an undeniable authority. She walked slowly but steadily, needing no support. Her sharp eyes scanned the room before landing on her trembling, unfilial son. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice warm but every word clear and commanding. "I apologize for my absence, which has allowed some unfortunate events to take place. I thought I was getting old, that I should step back and let the next generation take the lead. I never imagined I'd be nurturing a viper in my own home." Ethan stammered, his lips quivering. "Mom, you're not sick? You lied to me." Diane gave a bitter laugh. "If I hadn't, how would I have ever seen your true face, son? How would I know you saw your own mother as a burden to be dumped in a nursing home? How would I know you were taking your father's hard-earned money to spoil that homewrecker?" Each question was a knife twisting in Ethan's heart. He collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands, unable to meet his mother's gaze. Chloe looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. The room was deathly quiet. I stood beside Diane, feeling her hand tremble. She was putting on a brave face, but I knew her mother's heart was breaking. Diane took a deep breath and pointed to the door. "This meeting is adjourned. From today, Mia will be in charge. As for you, Ethan, prepare the handover documents and come to the apartment tonight. We need to talk." That evening, Ethan showed up at our small apartment, looking more pathetic than I had ever seen him. His designer shirt was wrinkled, his tie askew, and he reeked of alcohol. He stumbled inside and fell to his knees in front of Diane, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom, I was wrong. Please forgive me. It was all Chloe. She manipulated me. She put a spell on me. I'm still your son, Mom. Don't abandon me. Don't take the company. I'll have nothing," he begged, banging his head on the floor, blaming everything on his mistress. I leaned against the wall, feeling nothing but cold pity. Diane sat on the bed, her face a stony mask. She let him cry his heart out before slowly pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. She opened it and placed it on the floor in front of him. It was the agreement he had eagerly signed, relinquishing all responsibility for her in exchange for giving me $5,000. "Look closely," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "Whose signature is that? The day you signed this, you sold your mother for a pittance. You called me a burden. You said my life or death had nothing to do with you anymore." Ethan stared at the paper, his face ashen. He opened his mouth to argue, but Diane cut him off. "Your signature, your lawyer's seal. It's legally binding. According to this, I am now Mia's mother, not yours. I'm an old woman who needs care, and you have officially waived that right." "Mom, don't do this. I'm your son," he wailed. Diane stood and turned her back to him, her shoulders shaking. "My son? My son let his mother eat cold leftovers? My son stood by while his mistress abused me? Get out. I don't have a son like you. From now on, we are strangers." I walked to the door and held it open. "Please leave," I said coldly. "You chose Chloe and the high life. Stick with your choice. You don't deserve to have both." Ethan staggered to his feet, gave his mother one last look of despair, and stumbled out into the night. I closed the door and turned to see Diane finally break down, her face buried in her hands. I held her, letting her cry out the pain. The simple piece of paper on the floor had severed the last thread of a family. News of Ethan's ruin spread quickly. The first rat to jump ship was, unsurprisingly, Chloe. The next morning, security called to inform me she was in the accounting department, demanding cash. I smirked. I walked in to find her stuffing files and company seals into a large designer handbag. She jumped when she saw me, dropping a seal on the floor. Her face was a mask of panic, but she still tried to bluster her way through. "Get out of my way. This is Ethan's property. I have a right to it." I crossed my arms. "Ethan's property? He's drowning in debt. The car he's driving is about to be repossessed. What are you going to do? Sell those papers for scrap?" Hearing Ethan was broke, Chloe's eyes darted around. She threw the files back on the desk with a sneer. "Then I'm definitely leaving. I'm not stupid enough to go down with that loser. I'm young, I'm beautiful, I can find another rich man." Just then, Ethan burst in. He had heard she was trying to flee. He froze, hearing her callous words. "Chloe, what are you saying? You said you loved me, that you'd stick by me. What about our son?" Chloe turned to him, her face twisted with pure disgust. "Love you? Get real, Ethan. I loved your wallet. Now you're broken in debt. You think I'm crazy? And this baby," she patted her stomach with a cruel laugh. "You really think it's yours? We've only been together for 3 months. I'm 4 months along. It belongs to my ex. You were just the convenient idiot who was going to pay for it all. You fool." Ethan let out a roar of primal pain and lunged at her, but security held him back. At that moment, 2 police detectives walked in. "Miss Chloe Vance? You're under arrest for embezzlement. We have evidence you created fraudulent invoices to steal over $2 million from this company over the last 6 months." Cold handcuffs snapped around her wrists. She screamed and fought, but it was useless. Ethan slid down the wall, his eyes wide and vacant as he watched the love of his life get dragged away. The play was over. The truth was brutal. He had lost everything: his money, his family, his love, and his dignity. It was the price he paid for his betrayal. After Chloe's arrest, Ethan was left with nothing but a mountain of personal debt. He returned to the mansion, now with a foreclosure notice taped to the gate. The house was eerily silent. He collapsed onto the expensive leather sofa, a shiver running through him. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten all day. Out of habit, he called out, "Mia, I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat?" The only reply was the echo of his own voice in the empty house. He stumbled to the kitchen. The fridge was empty except for a few bottles of water and a container of moldy pâté. He hurled it against the wall in a rage. He sank to the cold kitchen floor and began to cry. In his hunger and loneliness, memories of me flooded his mind. He remembered the hot bowls of ramen I'd make him after a late night out, my hands massaging his temples when he had a hangover. I had never asked for designer bags or diamond rings, only for him to come home for dinner on time. He remembered how I had endured his constant smoking when I was pregnant and sick, quietly opening a window and making him lemon water without a word of complaint. He wept like a child, finally understanding that he had thrown away a priceless treasure for a cheap imitation. The next morning, the doorbell rang incessantly. It was a nanny he'd never seen before, with Leo in tow. "Chloe's gone," the woman said gruffly, shoving Leo towards him. "She didn't pay me for the month. He's your problem now." She turned and left. Leo immediately started wailing. "Where's Chloe? She promised to take me for chicken nuggets. I'm hungry." Ethan knelt to hug his son, but Leo pushed him away. "I don't want a hug. You smell bad. I want my iPad. Charge my iPad," he shrieked, his face contorted in a way that perfectly mirrored Chloe's. Ethan stared in horror. The years of spoiling had turned his son into a monster. All his pent-up frustration exploded. He slapped Leo on the bottom. "Be quiet. The family is in trouble and all you can do is demand things." It was the first time his father had ever hit him. Leo froze for a second, then erupted into hysterical sobs, throwing himself on the floor. "You're mean. I hate you. I want Mommy Mia. Mommy Mia never hits me." Hearing Leo cry out for me was the final knife in Ethan's heart. He stared at his hand, then at his son, and rushed to hold him, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, Leo. I'm so sorry. It's all my fault." He realized he had given his son everything money could buy, but had stolen from him the one thing he truly needed, a mother's love. That afternoon, father and son ate instant noodles in the cold, silent kitchen. Leo sniffled as he ate, his tears falling into the salty broth. Ethan watched him, his heart aching. He knew the road to fixing his son, and himself, would be long and hard. It was the price he had to pay. While Ethan hit rock bottom, I was steadily climbing. Taking over a failing company was a monumental challenge. I worked around the clock, untangling the financial mess Chloe had left, restructuring debt, and rebuilding trust with partners. I didn't rule with an iron fist like Ethan, nor with flirtatious manipulation like Chloe. I used sincerity and hard work. I ate with the factory workers, listened to their concerns, and promised to pay their salaries, even if it meant selling my own jewelry. Their loyalty became the bedrock of our recovery. Diane was my silent partner, my advisor. "You're a diamond in the rough, Mia," she told me one day, watching me lead a conference call. "The more pressure, the brighter you shine." I changed my appearance too. I cut my hair short and wore smart, elegant suits. My confidence grew. People who once dismissed me as a trophy wife now saw me as a formidable businesswoman. One afternoon, I secured a new line of credit from a bank manager who had previously refused to even meet with Ethan. "I believe in you, Miss Mia," he said, shaking my hand. "And I believe in the legacy of Diane Harrison." Walking out of that skyscraper, I felt the sun on my face and breathed in the air of freedom. I had proven that a woman doesn't need a man to succeed, she just needs to believe in herself. It was then that Ethan showed up at my new office. He looked worn and defeated. He saw the modern, successful space, and his eyes filled with a mixture of envy and longing. "Mia," he began, "I knew you could do it. I'm so proud of you. I've been thinking, for Leo's sake, we should get back together. I'll support you. I know you still love me." All of this was just to teach me a lesson, right? I looked at him with a mixture of pity and disbelief. His arrogance was so deeply ingrained, he still thought the world revolved around him. I calmly poured him a cup of tea. "Ethan, wake up. I reclaimed this company for your parents, not for you. I took care of your mother because she is a good woman, not because of you. And getting back together, I don't pick through the garbage for things I've already thrown out. Leo is welcome in my life anytime. You are not. His face fell. But why are you being so cruel? I'm not being cruel, Ethan. I'm being free. After I firmly rejected him, Ethan didn't leave right away. He just sat there, deflated. I sighed and brewed a pot of the simple lotus tea I loved. He used to call it tasteless country water. He took a sip. This is good. I never appreciated it before. You remembered I like hot tea. You're mistaken, I said softly. You like black coffee, no sugar. This is my favorite tea. In 5 years of marriage, you never once noticed. His hand froze. Do you remember my 28th birthday? I continued. You gave me a huge bouquet of red roses, bragging about how romantic you were, but you never knew I'm allergic to roses. I spent the night itching and secretly taking antihistamine so I wouldn't ruin your mood. I like simple white lilies, Ethan. I like spicy food, not the rare steaks you made me eat at business dinners. I like folk music and reading on rainy days, not the loud parties you dragged me to like an accessory. With every word, his head sank lower. He realized the woman he had lived with for 5 years was a complete stranger to him. He had never loved me. He had only loved the convenience I provided. I'm sorry, he whispered. I was so selfish. It wasn't just selfishness, I said, looking out the window. It's that I was never important enough for you to pay attention to. You took my sacrifices for granted. Now that you've lost everything, you feel regret, but you don't regret losing me. You regret losing the comfort I gave you. He tried one last time, playing the family card. But what about Mom? Don't you think she wants her son by her side? I turned back to face him, my eyes sharp. Let me ask you a question, Ethan. If my mother-in-law wasn't the majority shareholder of a multi-million-dollar company, if she was just a poor, sick old woman with nothing to her name, huddled in that tiny apartment, would you be here today, begging to come back? Or would you have let her waste away, forgotten? He couldn't answer. The silence was his confession. You don't love your mother. You love her money, I said, my voice flat. You don't love me or Leo. You just want a safe harbor from your debts. You're pathetic, Ethan. I opened the door. Goodbye. Don't ever use the words family or love with me again. You've made them cheap. He stumbled out of my office, a broken man. A year passed. Ethan completed his mandatory rehab and his year of manual labor. He showed up one last time before moving away to take a job a friend had offered him. He was leaner, tanner, his hands calloused, but his eyes clear. He thanked me for everything, for saving him, for raising Leo, for caring for his mother. Then he looked at me with a flicker of hope. Mia, if I work hard, if I become a better man, in a year or 2, could you give us another chance? I looked at the man he had become. The change was real, but the scars on my heart, though faded, remained. A broken vase can be glued back together, but the cracks will always show. I smiled, a gentle, final smile. The future is unwritten, Ethan. Go live your life. For yourself, for your son, for your mother. Don't make me your goal. Your goal should be to become the best version of yourself. As for us, let's just leave it to fate. He understood. It was not the answer he wanted, but it was the one he needed. It was the last kindness I could offer the man who was once my husband. After he left, I booked 2 tickets for a 5-star cruise through the Caribbean. It was time for Diane to see the world. She protested the cost, but I insisted. You've worked your whole life, Mom. It's time to enjoy it. We shopped for new clothes, bright silks, and elegant scarves. Seeing her twirl in front of a mirror, a shy, happy smile on her face, filled my heart with a quiet joy. At the airport, we were no longer the weary housewife and the forgotten mother. We were 2 confident, radiant women, ready for an adventure. Ethan video called from a dusty construction site, his eyes filled with a deep, unspoken regret as he saw us, happy and free, about to board a plane to paradise. He wished us well, his voice thick with emotion. He was a spectator to the beautiful life he had thrown away. The massive cruise ship cut through the turquoise water, leaving the land and all its troubles behind. Diane and I stood on the deck, the sea breeze in our hair, the endless horizon before us. It's beautiful, she whispered, tears in her eyes. I wish your father-in-law could see this. I put my arm around her. He can, Mom. He's in your heart, and in the family we've rebuilt. We stood there, two women who had survived betrayal and heartbreak, now the captains of our own destinies. I didn't know what the future held. Perhaps I would find love again, perhaps not, but I knew I would never again settle for anything less than I deserved. The ship's horn sounded, a long, triumphant blast, as we sailed toward our next port of call. I turned to my mother-in-law, my best friend, my true family. "Come on, Mom," I said, smiling. "Let's go get some dinner. I hear the lobster is amazing." We walked arm in arm across the sun-drenched deck. A new world of possibilities awaited us. My journey to happiness had truly just begun.